One can say that the corruption that we knew in previous areas with a lot of seepage of money leaking out to private pockets and for political proxies has basically been eliminated from from the authority perspective of money which it controls. Two, one of the stated parts of the plan was Palestinian unity. And here it's very clear that nothing has been achieved. There are no unity talks going on. I would state that the Palestinian Authority and the PLO have no strategy for regaining control over Gaza and for reuniting Palestinian Authority governance over the two Palestinian areas. There is no effective deliberation, to the best that I can denote, taking place within Palestinian government authorities and within the PLO of how to go about this, and the future does not look very bright in terms of the ability of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority to assert its control over the Gaza Strip any time in the near future, which of course will have an impact not only on the ability to create the independent Palestinian state with its territorial integrity, but also will impact on the ability of the PLO to conduct negotiations with Israel, because this will always be an issue that will be brought out by the Israelis on whether or not Palestine will be a successful state or failed state defining, meaning a state which has control over the use of force or military policing powers within the states under one government, and that obviously is not the case today. Three, issues of democracy and the rule of law. We have a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council in the audience. One of the things that we know is that the Palestinian Legislative Council, the parliament, is not a body which is actually working. It's not legislating. The process of legislation, which is done in the Palestinian Authority today, is that laws are prepared by professionals, by lawyers, by consultants. They're brought to the cabinet, which votes on them and receives a cabinet approval, and then it's signed as a presidential decree. This is the way that the Palestinian legislation is taking place today. It is effective. There is significant work, good work, being done in the area of legislation, but we must also note that it is not the designated process of legislation by the Palestinian Basic Law, and there are questions of democracy and legitimacy that have to be brought up here. This is a reality of the current system of government and the regime in Palestine after the Hamas takeover of the Palestinian Authority government. So this is certainly something that is on the agenda, it is noted, and one must recognize that it is perhaps the wet dream of any prime minister to be able to legislate in this way, not having to deal with actual parliaments, but there are questions of legitimacy involved. Secondly, with regard to the rule of law, here's an area where there is a marked improvement, and Samir noted the court system is working and cases are being heard and new judges have been appointed, and they're young and dynamic and effective, and the judiciary branch is certainly greatly improved. I myself was witness to it when I visited the district court in Ramallah and saw what was going on there. On the other hand, one must also note that there is a significant use of non-democratic measures being taken under the Palestinian Authority in order to effectively carry out what they were demanded to do within phase one of the roadmap, which was to remove the infrastructure of terrorism within the Palestinian Authority areas. Now, in order to do that, what it meant is that institutions connected to the Hamas and Islamic Jihad were closed down. These were schools and kindergartens and charitable societies and health clinics and elected officials, mayors of local governments who have been systematically arrested under administrative detention rules, similarly used by Israel, the occupation powers. There are many hundreds of Palestinians who are in administrative detention in Palestinian Authority prisons. This is an effective implementation of roadmap obligations by the Palestinian Authority. It should be noted that they have done an excellent job of removing the infrastructures of terrorism as demanded by the roadmap. On the other hand, I know that a great number of Palestinians are concerned about this being done in less than democratic means, And this has to be noted because it is a concern of legitimacy with regard to carrying out the plans of the Fayyad government. Fourth is the political party side of this. One of the clear signs of success of the Fayyad government, being a technocratic government, is the great displeasure of the Fatah party with what has happened over the past year. Mainly the cutting of funds to Fatah, namely the removal of Fatah activists from positions of power and government, and a continual demand from Fatah party officials and the Central Council and the Revolutionary Council to have a government shake-up and to have key positions be filled by Fatah activists. This is something that Prime Minister Fayyad has managed to not do for a long period of time. There are continual rumors, almost daily, that a government shake-up is going to happen. I hear it every week. I'm sure everyone else does, that imminently there will be a shake-up of government and some of the people will be removed. I know that Prime Minister Fayyad is interested in removing some of the ministers because he's not satisfied with their performance, but this is also coupled with a demand from the Fatah party to put Fatah people in positions of government. And here there's also a situation where the government, the Prime Minister and the government were appointed by the President and not elected. It's not an elected government, and there is a question, again, of political power and political parties and the ability of a non-political Palestinian Authority or a non-political party Palestinian Authority to carry out the task of creating the Palestinian state. And lastly, on a high note, is the issue of public impression. Public impression both locally and internationally. There is no doubt to anyone who travels anywhere in the Palestinian Authority that there is a sharply marked improvement of quality of life, of sense of security, of economic development and growth. A sense of normalcy almost exists throughout the occupied territories, certainly in areas where people are not confronted with the reality of the separation barrier or land expropriations or living right next to a settlement. But in most of the Palestinian cities and in a lot of the villages, there is a sense of normalcy of life, a status quo which is almost acceptable in terms of people's daily lives. There is a sense of security, there is a sense of something is happening. There's a pleasure with what's going on, and anyone who goes to Ramallah, but not only Ramallah, witnesses this in the nightlife, in the restaurants and cafes that have opened, in young people going out and living for the first time in many, many years, that young people can actually go out and have a sense that they are similar to other young people in the world, which is something that Palestinian young people have not been able to do for many years. So in the local sense, there is a strong feeling that there is a large achievement taking place, and this is reflected in the public opinion polls with a high level of satisfaction directed at Prime Minister Fayyad. Internationally, and this is perhaps a little bit more complex, this feeling is even multiplied. There is a sense amongst the international community that something real is taking place, that the Palestinian state is in the fact, it is in the process of being born, and there is an expectation, a heightened expectation in the international community that the creation of the institutions of statehood, the implementation of the plan of economic growth and success, is creating the expectation that at some time at the end of this plan, in the end of 2011, political developments will have to take place that will enable the actual birth of the plan. Now, as Samir Abdullah said, this was not a plan, and Prime Minister Fayyad never said that at the other end of the plan we're going to declare independence. For one, Prime Minister Fayyad is keenly aware that the Palestinians declared independence already in November 15, 1988. And you don't declare independence twice. They already did it. They have a declaration of independence, it was done. So the process is not, will they declare independence in 1988, at the end of 2011? The question is, will the international community relate to Palestine as an independent state? Will it grant it recognition? There is no international law for recognizing a state. Recognition of statehood is granted by other states. In principle, there are already 205 countries around the world, 105 countries in the world today. 105 countries in the world today which recognize the state of Palestine. Some of those are states that are now members of the European Union. When they recognized Palestine, they were not, but some of them are today. So the question is, will the United States, will the European Union, will the other large countries of the world recognize the existence of a Palestinian state? And if they do, what does that mean if there are negotiations or if there are no negotiations with Israel at that time? What will be the tools available both to the Palestinians and to the international community with enabling the final and ultimate goal of the Fayyad plan to be implemented, namely ending the occupation and creating the state of Palestine? So the challenges are great before us. Achievements have been significant. There are problems that have to be noted and undertaken and worked on, and I think those things are happening.